Okay, so we are beginning chapter Chav Ches. We made it to chapter 28 today, and this is really the last of the section of 3 chapters, starting with 26, 27, 28, where we are dealing with different ideas that will bring us to depression, right? And how to offset them. So in chapter 26, we talked about different things that, God forbid, could happen from the point of view of the physical world, whether it's in areas of health, in areas of wealth, in areas of children, right? So that's what we dealt with in chapter 26. In chapter 27, we dealt with what about if all these negative thoughts are still coming up in our minds, and we're seeing in ourselves that really we haven't made much progress in our avoda over the past X amount of time. You know, whether you're talking about a week, whether you're talking about 30 years, right? I'm still getting tested with the same desires and the same negative thoughts. So maybe that should make me get depressed, make me give up. So we came up with a whole explanation of what's going on and explanation of how to fix that. The last chapter, chapter 28, is what happens if these negative thoughts are coming up in the middle of my davening. Right at the time when I'm supposed to be serving Hashem, right, in the ultimate way, I'm sitting here, I'm praying to Hashem, and what's going on in my mind? I'm getting all these negative thoughts. That must mean that I am really, really a loser, right? It must mean that I really am not succeeding, and maybe I should just give up. Like, I'm trying so hard. I came to yeshiva, right? And I'm working and working and working. And I'm studying and I'm learning and I'm doing all this stuff. And look at me, I'm still thinking about these crazy notions in the middle of the moment when I'm having a personal meeting with God. That must be the absolute proof that I am the problem here. And I should probably give up. So the Alter Rebbe comes to our rescue and he says, "Va'afilu im noiflim lo hirhurei taivas v'shar machshava zaras b'shas ha'avoda b'torah o b'tefillah b'kavanah." He says, even if it falls into our mind, right, different desires, inappropriate desires that I have, or other negative thoughts that I shouldn't be having, during the time of when I'm learning Torah, or in the time when I'm davening, right? Al yashis leiva leihem el yasiach daiso mehem kerega. So he says, a very first point is action. The first point is action. The first point is, let's not get involved with trying to figure out why this is happening. Instead, let's start with the bottom line. The bottom line is, take your mind away from it. It's popping up into my brain. It doesn't matter. Right now, what I need to do is focus on the Torah that I'm learning, focus on the davening that I'm doing. That's what I have to do. Yeah? V'gam al yihi shoyte la'asok b'halas amida shel ha'machshava zara. Now, kanoida. So he says, and this is a very strong language that the Alter Rebbe uses here. There is a concept that it talks about in Chassidus, that the Baal Shem Tov speaks about, which is an idea that if a person has a negative thought come into their mind, this must mean that I am supposed to elevate that negative thought back to the source from which it came. Meaning what? If I have a desire for something, right? So that desire for this pizza, right, that I have, right? Or this non-kosher food that I want to eat, whatever it is, right? That desire is coming from a place of which midah? The midah of chesed, right? So what you could think is, Hashem wants me to elevate that thought, which means to try to trace it back to the attributes of chesed, of kedusha, of holiness, and to recognize that that thought got diverted, so to speak, and wound up becoming chesed of klipa. So what I need to do is now take that thought of chesed of klipa and elevate it back up to a level of what we'll call chesed of kedusha. So he says a very interesting thing. This concept does exist. This is Chassidus. This is Kabbalah. This is not a crazy concept. This is a real concept. The question is, who is this concept made for? And that's the point that he's bringing out here. What do I need to do? What I need to do is take my mind away from this concept. Take my mind away from this thought. Take my mind away from this machshava zara. That's my job right now. Action. With regards to elevating it, is that a possibility? Yes. But who is the possibility for? For a tzaddik, not for me. In other words, a tzaddik has the power to be able to elevate thoughts. Why? Because he has a connection above in a much different way than I have. So how do you expect me, who's stuck down here, to elevate something up to there? It's impossible. It's not an appropriate response. So the first thing I have to do is, number one, recognize what I have to do in action first. Take my mind away from it. All of a sudden, it pops into my mind, boom, right away to davening, right away to focus on the words again. That's, by the way, it's very important to, when you daven with a siddur. And you look in the siddur, because when you look at the words, it draws you back in. When a person is davening, and thinking and looking up in the air, and even though he knows all the words by heart, it's very easy for the mind to just drift. But when a person is focusing on looking at the words draw him in. Point number 2 is, don't try to lift something up if you're stuck down here. Be realistic who you are. And that's what he says. V'gam al yesh shaita. Don't be a fool, he says. La'asoik ba'alas amida. Right, to elevate, to get involved in the elevation of the midah shel hamachshava zara, of this particular bad thought. Kenoda, ki lo ne'amru dvarim hahem ela l'tzadikim. Because this advice, this instruction book of how to spiritually change these thoughts was specifically given to tzadikim. She'ein noifel mehem machshava zaras. They don't get machshava zaras. They don't get these negative thoughts. Right? It's just that when a tzaddik is around other people, he's able to pick up on the thoughts of other people and he's able to elevate them. But the person himself, right? The person himself is stuck down here below. If he's stuck down here below, how is he going to lift something up? It's impossible. So don't be foolish and think that you are something that you're not. Once again, we see a similar concept to what we saw in chapter 27. A lot of our trouble comes from thinking that we are someone that we're not. Having the wrong goalposts. When a person plays the game and has the wrong goalposts, he's going to lose. It's impossible. And it will often bring to frustration, depression, and ultimately giving up. But if the person has the right goalposts, he knows what his aim is, what his objective is, so then it's realistic, as long as the goals are realistic, and we know that the goals are, right? So, how is a person, though, supposed to feel? Here he is, he's trying to serve Hashem, he's trying to daven, he's trying to learn, he's trying to do the right thing, and all of a sudden, in his mind, he's thinking about all these crazy things. He's a loser. Come on, he's not accomplishing, he's not doing, Hashem doesn't like him, obviously. He's putting, what's going on? So he says, aval, misha noifelo mishalo, bebechinas harara shebelibo bechal asmoli, eche aleu l'mayla v'hu yatzma mekusha l'mata. Sorry, I skipped the line. That, how is it possible for him to be able to lift up this thought if he is down here, stuck down here below? And that's the idea with it. Now back to what I was saying. However, that a person shouldn't, literally, lo yipol libo, that his heart should not fall. Meaning, like, he shouldn't get upset, he shouldn't get depressed, he shouldn't lose hope, right? Lios mizeh atzuv. In order to become depressed at the time when he's learning, at the time when he's davening. Don't do that. Shetzarich liyos b'simcha rabba, because as we learned earlier, we're supposed to be in this tremendous joy. Here we are, we're having a connection to Hashem in the most revealed way, by us learning His Torah, by us davening to Hashem. That is a time of unbelievable simcha, not a time of depression. So what should he do? He should make himself even stronger. Yischazek, make himself stronger. B'yosef oimetz, and put himself completely in it. B'chol koicho, with all of his efforts, with all of his strength. B'kavanas hatfila, right, with the intention of understanding what it is that he's saying in his davening. B'chedva v'simcha yisera, with a tremendous amount of joy and happiness, even more than before. B'shuma libo ki nefilas ha'machshava zara hi mehaklipa shebachal ha'smayli ha'oisem milchama v'beinani im nefesh ha'alokis shebelibo. So he's basically saying like this: I have to know that I have two parts of me. I have a nefesh alokis and I have a nefesh bahamis. My nefesh bahamis is throwing these thoughts at me. It's trying to knock me down. It's trying to get me off my base. It's trying to knock me off my hill, my mountain, right? Like, you ever play when we were younger, King of the Mountain or King of the Hill? What was it called? No, not Jack and Jill went up the hill. King of the Hill, right? So everyone tries to push you off, right? And you're trying to. So the nefesh alokis is trying to be the king of the hill, and the nefesh bahamis is coming and throwing stones at him, and pushing him and doing all this stuff to try to knock him off the hill. So instead of feeling all depressed that, oh gosh, how come my nefesh bahamis is coming and trying to knock me off the hill, instead make myself stronger. I have to make myself even stronger. And how does it mean stronger? In two ways that we're describing. Number one, focus more on the words of davening and who you're davening to. And number two, become even happier. Now, why should I be happier? V'noide derech hanilchamim became nizavkim yachad keshe'achad mizgaber azay hasheni misametz mizgaber gamken b'chol ma'amtzi koicho. So he says, why should I be happy? Because we know that when you're having a wrestling match, or you're playing against someone else, and one side tries very hard, so then the other side is going to try even harder. In other words, if you're standing there, like, I never did wrestling when I was a kid, but you see it in high school, right? People are doing like wrestling. They're like standing and holding, and all of a sudden one guy goes like that, and the other guy, then he goes like that, right? He like tries very hard, right? They're both trying very hard at the same time. That's what happens. One causes the other to try hard. So the fact that I am right now getting these negative thoughts must mean that I'm accomplishing something. That's the point. I must be accomplishing something. If I wasn't accomplishing something, the nefesh bahamis would not be trying to push me off the hill. The animal soul would not be trying to win. That's the point of this whole story. The fact that I'm actually getting these negative thoughts is a proof that I'm accomplishing something right now. And therefore, I have to try even harder and push myself even more, but in a way of happiness, in a way of simcha. That's the idea here. And so we learn from our enemies. We learn from the animal soul that when the animal soul is pushing its agenda and pushing it in a major way, I know that my agenda is accomplishing. Because if my agenda would not be accomplishing, then he would also not be trying so hard. But as soon as I get bombarded by different thoughts, it must mean that I'm doing something right. And that's the point here, right? So this is something to take to the bank. This is something that a person has to live with, a person has to think about when he sits down to daven, when he sits down to learn. He has to realize he has to make his nefesh alokis the king of the hill. And even when the nefesh bahamis tries to knock him off the hill, he takes it as a sign that he's accomplishing, not as a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength. And that's how he has to, so to speak, respond to it. So number one, more kavanah. I try even harder with whatever it is that I'm doing. Number two, more simcha, more happiness. Okay? And therefore he says, so when the Nefesh Elokis tries even harder and wins out to davening, so also the negative side, the klipa, is also going to try to win out, to try to fight against me. Libalbala, in order to confuse me. V'lahapila, and to drop me down b'machshava zaras shala, right, with all of his machshava zaras. Those are the missiles that I'm getting. The missiles that I get are specifically from my nefesh Bahamis throwing in these machshava zaras, right? V'lok ta'os ha'olam shetayim lahoichiach min nefilas ha'machshava zara michlal she'ein tfilas o klum she'ilu hispal karoi v'nachon lo hayu noiflim lo machshava zaras. So he says like this: the world makes a big mistake. What's the mistake of the world? The mistake of the world is that they assess the point that if I'm getting these machshava zaras, if I'm getting these negative thoughts pop into my mind while I'm davening, it must mean that I am not accomplishing. It must mean that I'm failing miserably. Because otherwise, why would I be getting these machshava zaras? And that's how we started the chapter. We started the chapter by saying, look at this. I'm in the middle of davening and I'm thinking about pizza and basketball instead of thinking about God and everything that pizza and basketball connotates. Right? It's depressing on the one hand, you could say. On the other hand, he's saying, no, it's not depressing at all. It's actually enlivening. Why? Because it must mean that I'm doing something right. Because if I wasn't doing something right, the Nefesh Bahamis wouldn't care to fight against me. The fact that the Nefesh Bahamis, the animal soul, is fighting against me is a proof that I'm doing something right. That's how we're going to end for today.